Awesome. Yeah, I'm all set.
All right, then let's get ourselves started. All right, thank you everyone for showing up. I hope you guys are excited about the boot camp coming up with Jacob, and he's going to be doing environment. So today we're joined with Jacob Claussen. He just got recently made head of the game art department here at Vertex. Congratulations. It's awesome to have you running the show on GAP. Um, and Jacob, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, sure. And thank you. It's I've been part of Vertex School for a long time, so it's quite nice to get this opportunity to kind of look at everything when it comes to the game art part and try to help out. But I can talk a little bit about my history basically. I've kind of done a little bit of everything in the game industry, I would say. Everything from the small to the little bit bigger. So when I started, it was basically 15 years almost ago. I think it's like 14 now. And I went to university, and we were a bit bored during the first year, so we kind of took the weekends and started building a game together. A couple of me and some friends at the university, and that kind of ended up becoming kind of like an indie studio. We kind of got funding and started to kind of build that game after school basically. And then when school was over, we had that kind of company and experience. And I would say going from starting with indie was a lot about wearing all the different hats. So I did everything from characters to environment to buying coffee for the studio to Friday fika, as we call it in Sweden. Um, so it was a little bit of everything. Of course, we all didn't know really what we were doing. So it was a lot of just try and error, which was a very good exercise, I think. Makes you very kind of stubborn to really kind of get it to work at eventually. Um, but I think I felt always that I wanted to do a little bit more bigger and realistic stuff. I was very big fan of Naughty Dog, like every environment was artist was at that point and still are, I think. So I kind of like that work was mainly like stylized. We did a lot of ZBrushing. We even didn't have a license really for Maya, so we basically did everything in ZBrush. So we basically UV mapped in ZBrush, so very guerrilla game like development.
Mm,
But then I kind of like on my free time always kind of worked on my own stuff, like more semi-realism, more kind of what you see in a Naughty Dog game basically. And I kind of worked on that, and eventually, when our game was done, I kind of started looking at new opportunities. And in Stockholm, they were doing a Walking Dead game. So I was original like from a small town outside of Stockholm. So I kind of took the chance and applied and joined Starbreeze, who is mostly famous for the Payday series. And they worked on a Walking Dead game, and it felt like a really good kind of like stepping stone for me. Of course, I joined in a very kind of like a tricky environment, I would say. The game had kind of like not worked out as it's maybe was planned, so it was a quite hectic development, but that was also a very good learning curve. Um, During that production, I also got to experience to be a little bit of a lead because we kind of lost our lead for the project for a while, so I took over being an environment lead. And if anyone has questions about the different roles and stuff like that, I'm happy to explain it. But
mm,
basically, I was overseeing kind of like the environment team a little bit on that production, and we kind of knew that the game was built very fast, so we knew that would probably not work out, but we kind of poured in everything when it comes to like the art side, and I think were quite happy with the time we had with it basically. But I kind of like on the side still did portfolio, tried a little bit different things, but mainly like semi-realism still. And Ubisoft Stockholm opened up in Stockholm basically. And Ubisoft was kind of like a bit of a dream studio always. Like I played the Assassin's Creed game a lot, the early ones. Um, and I basically just got a call, and they asked if I like to do vegetation. So I had some people working there, and they probably recommended me, and I said of course yes, but I barely have done any vegetation. So after call, and we were about to meet the week after, I was a bit like, okay, and I kind of need to like understand vegetation now. So I basically just spread through learning vegetation for that meeting, so I would know a little bit what to talk about, because I knew that Simon Bale worked there, which is a very good vegetation artist, and for me it was a little bit the possibility to do something called a more specialized role. So this was for the Avatar project, and I think they were probably quite happy with kind of like how much I showed I wanted to have the role. So I got that job, and I start working on the Avatar game as a vegetation artist. But then when you are a vegetation artist, of course you are more of a specialized role, but you get to jump around and do a little bit more um, conventional environment artwork. So I helped out on Division, for example, and some unannounced games also. But for me, it was a little bit like while working for Ubisoft. I liked it, and I liked the size, and it was like very high production. But for me, it was always a little bit missing the sense of working in a smaller team again, because I kind of came from there, and we lost kind of like some of the people I kind of work close with, and we moved away from the Avatar project, and then I had to make a bit of a decision, because when you do like AAA, the production times are very long. So if I joined the next project, it would be, I knew it would be a long production, and I kind of want to go the whole way usually through a production. So I had to kind of have a crossroad decision there, if I wanted to keep doing the specialized role or maybe try out something new. And here in Stockholm, some ex Dice people had opened a kind of like an indie studio or a 2A studio with 20 people, and they wanted to do a competitive shooter. And it felt like a very kind of like they wanted to keep a high ceiling on fidelity, but doing in a smaller team. So that felt a very exciting. So I joined as a lead environment artist there, and it was basically nobody of us that worked on that game had worked on like a competitive shooter in the environment team. So it was basically learn by doing, a little bit back to what the indie studio was, but it was a great experience. I got to move slowly over to more art direction, first in the environment field, but then kind of main art direction. But kind of kept doing my side projects. I think I start moving more into like learning 2D and concepting on the side. So I always kind of like trying to broaden myself a little bit. And eventually, like sadly, we lost funding kind of like during spring, and that kind of when the project kind of went down a little bit. And of course, it's sad and not fun to see the project never come into life completely. But I think the experience I had with my coworkers there, it's like friends for life, basically. Um,
Cool.
so yeah, that's kind of like my story a little bit.
Definitely very, I see the tree. I see all the branches. So thank you. Thank you for going through that. Just to briefly kind of cover what we're going to talk about today with our session. So just so you guys know, we're going to talk about the 14-week boot camp that's coming up. We're also going to talk about what it looks like to be an environment artist, like what goes on in studios, and what we're going to, and also we'd like to cover a little bit about what to expect in the boot camp, and you know, figuring out what it is to be an environment artist, because I'm sure most of you guys are definitely here to find out what it is to be an environment artist, and I'm sure you guys have plans to become environment artists in the industry. So from that, I think first, if you don't mind, Jacob, let's do a couple interview questions just to kind of go over the basics and then we'll maybe jump into the demo if there's no questions after we go over this. All right.
Sounds good.
All right. Cool. So you kind of covered this a little bit, but um, you covered how you got into the industry, but when you got in as an environment artist, like what drew you to being an environment artist particularly?
I think for me it was so like the story before that was a little bit like I wanted to move work in movies. Like that was like the original idea, and I went to university for video games to kind of just learn 3D to eventually move over to movies. So kind of movie storytelling has always been a big interest. So kind of the environment, kind of speaking in those kind of compositions and stuff like that, has always been a quite big inspiration for me. But I think it was basically when I played Last of Us One, like the first one. That kind of like pointed me in a direction. I think also a little bit like the Assassin's Creed series, like the first games. I'm like a big history buff, just like recapturing the stories of the past, but rendered for us to kind of experience. Like for me, that just felt right. So I think, and it was quite nice. Like we were two 3D artists and the indie studio I worked at, and we kind of branched off naturally. He did characters and I did environments. Funny enough, he's doing environments now also. So we both went there eventually. But yeah, I think it was just kind of like the being able to tell stories through environments is just something I'm very passionate about. And then mixing in lighting with that and the camera work and stuff like that, it's as fun as what was kind of 10 years ago for me.
Awesome. It definitely resonates. Um, and let me ask you, so as an environment artist, what are some of the biggest challenges like you've kind of confronted in the industry?
Uh, I think like every place has been kind of like a bump, I would say. So I usually recommend everyone to kind of like, because when we kind of trying to get into a studio or role, we do a lot of portfolio work and we work a lot on the side. So I always recommend like when you join a studio to maybe take a pause from the personal work the first half year, because I
Mhm.
think like every time I've joined a studio, the first half year has been kind of like a bit of a hurdle to come into everything, and I think everyone knows it and it's totally fine. So I always try to not stress doing other side on the like side when I joined a new thing. And I think for me it's always about also being a little bit uncomfortable. So I rather go to a role where I maybe are struggling a little bit, because then I know that I'm kind of like learning and pushing myself basically. So I would say everything from kind of joining kind of from the indie studio where it was very kind of hectic and I feel like we didn't know anything, to joining a studio where you felt like you would just everything would just fall into place, but then the grass was not that greener, like that realization, to of course moving over to like a big production like Avatar,
Yeah.
and feeling the pressure of maybe doing very kind of like high tier art, sitting next to what maybe one of the best vegetation artists in the field, to doing kind of leadership in studio that never done like a first person shooting game in semi-realism style. Like I think every point has had their tricky parts, but I think for me that's also bit the fun, I would say. Like
All right. Not all good. Um, so moving on from that, when it comes to keeping up to date with your skill set, so like between Unreal Engine, Substance Painter, Designer, any programs that you're usually familiar with, how do you kind of schedule or keep up to date with like the newer versions?
So I try. So I still do like personal projects because
Mhm.
it's a kind of an outlet for me. Like 3D is almost like playing video games for me still. So it's a bit dangerous. Like I like it very much still. So I cannot still do personal project. And with personal project, I get this chance to maybe not do what I do normally at work.
Mm,
Like as a lead or art director is mainly just making sure that the group is comfortable and knowing kind of where to steer. So usually when I start a project, I put maybe 2 or 3 pillars of things I want to improve. So I always kind of put those pillar as a focus. So for example, with my latest scene, like the Coletti bar, I hadn't done that much designer. Like Substance Designer is kind of a very specific program. Usually in
mhm.
studios you have like texture artists and stuff like that. So with that project, that was kind of the main focus together with like photogrammetry. So I like to kind of like do parts that I'm kind of like comfortable with, like modeling and all of those things, and storytelling, and I maybe sprinkle in a little bit of uncomfortability.
Mm,
So a current scene I'm working now, I'm learning VFX and animations, for example. So I have like characters I'm going to animate for it. So I'm always like having like 2, maximum of 3 pillars I try to like push with my personal projects.
that's awesome. That's a great way of explaining it. Um, so kind of like talking about skills. Are there any skills that you'd say are like non-negotiable if you're trying to get into the industry as an environment artist? Like you need
Um,
those skills.
yeah, yeah, I think like fundamentals, like every type of
Mm,
artistic or maybe not even artistic job is so important. And I think the more you kind of horn in on the fundamentals, the less kind of like flow state you can be in. Like you can just work without any hesitation. So I think like just polishing and becoming better at the fundamentals. I think that's kind of like something I still try to do. So I can still sometimes just do blockouts because it's fun or I learn something from it. Um, I would say the biggest one I would say that usually you learn by time would be usually when we are trying to get into the industry, we are like thinking environment artists, like very centric. We probably just talk to environment artists and become very fixated on that role. And I would say eventually when you're entering the industry and coming into the studio, I think thinking more as a game developer, that's something that's always very positive seen basically. And what I mean with that is, of course, like a game is environment, but it's so many other aspects, and every role has kind of their needs and wants. And I
mm,
think the more you can kind of learn a little bit from them, like understanding a level designer or understanding a character artist or a lighting artist, and understanding their needs, the more you can kind of gel with them. And that's I think where kind of like game development magic happens when that kind of works well together.
all right, awesome. Um, there is a question from one of the students,
Mm,
Stefan. They're asking about when you were talking about funding and such.
mm.
Can you see the question or
Yeah, let's see. So you probably ask, hi Stefan, probably asked about the indie studio. So
hmm,
what we basically did was that we went to university, and they had like something called an incubator. I don't know if that's an English word, but kind of like a place you can go to after like after studies or like in the evenings and stuff like that. It's basically government funded place where you can learn about finance and starting a company, and you get the possibility of having a small office space. And they also open up the possibility of like travel, like helping maybe studios starting to work to kind of travel to places. So we basically went with those. So we got an office space, and then we just started to travel to like different conventions, basically. And of course, the Gamescom, we kind of financed that with like winning our competition with an early game that the studio did as students, and then like we we cannot went and won like a competition to enter E3 that sadly doesn't exist anymore. So we won 2 tickets to that. So very like a guerrilla. It was like a cookie clicker competition we won basically for going to E3. Um, and we sent basically the 2 people that was the most kind of social party people, because we heard that like investment usually don't happen during kind of the investment rounds. It's more kind of like when you are at the parties and you just kind of like chat along. So you send the 2 people that was basically the party people, and they got some good contacts, and after that we showed the game to different kind of like investors, and finally we went with like a Swedish one, because then we had like a quite close connection with them and stuff like that, and that's a little bit how it kind of went down. And yeah, incubator is basic. I don't know if it exists, but here in Sweden, it's basically they are usually next to schools, and they are basically there to help to start companies, basically. So they have like people teaching about investment and economy, and they usually rent out like a small kind of office space for kind of like a very slow sum.
There was
Yeah,
another question. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
I would say like networking is like A and O. Um, so usually I would say nowadays also it's a lot about just it's changed a little bit now, I would say. Like now it's a bit harder. Like before, money was this was like 10 years ago, and now I would say it's more about showing that you have a product that is kind of reliable, and that can be through just pure wish list on Steam, or having a like a community bound to the project, or having kind of like a very kind of like half finished project. So before, maybe you just needed kind of a pitch deck, and some party people. And I would say now maybe it's more building kind of like something that feels very kind of like adaptable to the market.
We also had another student, Dana or Donna. She was asking about environment artists if they're allowed to come up with like their own concepts or their own kind of like ideas before they start modeling.
A great question. So it's a question close to my heart, because I really like the part of infusing a little bit of yourself. So I would say it's every studio I've been to so far, it's a bit more up to the artist, I would say. So you have the environment artists that are more kind of like just want to kind of model towards concepts, and they are that's what they kind of like to do. And usually there is concepts for them or briefs, and then you have maybe a little bit more self-going artists, environment artists that want to kind of like create on their own. And then I think like communication is very important. So something I did at Walking Dead, for example, I got the opportunity to kind of set dress all the apartments, and they were kind of like already a little bit like set dressed by level designers with like a Blockout, and I felt they didn't feel that American, maybe like they felt a little bit kind of like guest American, and they became a bit samey. So what I did was kind of sit down with maybe the level designer and trying to understand what they were trying to do, how they were trying to lead the player, and then talking to the concept artists, like what were their idea of the mood and stuff like that, and then kind of infusing those aspects with my own kind of reference and thoughts. So I would say as long as you're taking kind of the other people's aspect into consideration, usually it's kind of like positive to breathe in a little bit of yourself into your stuff.
She also asked, she asked if you could show, but in your opinion, what would be the best way to kind of show your portfolio to recruiters? She was asking whether it be website, PDF, links, or videos. Excuse me.
So yeah, so I've been in the process like as an art director or lead, getting portfolios and stuff like that. And I've talked to people, and I would say most are kind of in agreement that it's nice when it's just ArtStation with as few clicks as possible. So I would say, especially for game environment game jobs, basically, I would say ArtStation. and trying to like limit the clicks as much as possible is kind of the goal. Because you work for a fairly big studio, you might have like 50 portfolios to went over. And then if you like click up one portfolio and it's like I don't know, I've opened portfolios that been on kind of just a PDF that you have to scroll like endlessly, or like a website made by the person, which is cool, but I think if it breaks or it doesn't work on a mobile phone, etc., like there's so many aspects, I would just simplify it and just to use ArtStation basically. Because the nice thing is also like everyone knows ArtStation, everyone knows how to click around, and I would say leadership is usually a little bit like on the older side, so they are not maybe as techy, so they kind of like comfortability when they kind of click around, I would say.
Makes sense. Absolutely great. Another student, Brendan, we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll move on a little bit. Was asking about when preparing a portfolio, what matters most, standing out to like a larger company, or do you think having a strong indie company kind of take notice of you?
So I would say like I would probably go for what you really wanna do. I think it's always good to cater your portfolio in the beginning. So if you have a very kind of specific studio, let's say Ubisoft is a very kind of common goal for a lot of people. I would really study what they are doing. What I would also do is maybe study all the kind of juniors that joined recently, go into their art station, see what they released before joining the studio. So you get kind of like a very kind of honest answer what is needed to join. And then of course is always a bit part of luck, having the right person seeing your portfolio, etc. But I think that way you kind of build a little bit more luck. And I would say the biggest aspect is probably like curating your portfolio in the beginning. So less is more always. I got my first job with like 2 portfolio scenes. I was very harsh to myself in the beginning. I didn't have a portfolio before half year before applying to Starbreeze because I was never happy with what I was doing. And I think it's good to still kind of break that a little bit by being comfortable releasing stuff. So I kind of open up Instagram when that was still kind of like more of a used website, and just put kind of my everything there, and then just the very curated stuff on ArtStation. Because I think as artists, we still want to kind of push out things and show stuff.
Mm.
But I would maybe use ArtStation blogs or Twitter or Instagram for that maybe, and then very curated and focused on ArtStation.
You actually just gave me a really good question to ask you. So it sounded like you were kind of dealing with imposter syndrome. There, I can use English. So I'm hearing that, and I think I hear a way that you kind of combated it, but just to kind of like talk a little bit more about it. Students all the time are dealing, even myself, you know,
Mm.
you kind of struggle with the idea, am I good enough? Do you have any recommendations for dealing with imposter syndrome and like getting the courage to post your work up?
Yeah, I mean, I still do it, I would say. Like, I think that the goalpost is always just going to move upwards.
Mm.
So, yeah, and I think that's just the artist in us. Like, we're never going to be satisfied. So I think like with my latest scene, I kind of still kind of cringed before clicking publish, but I think at some point you have to click that publish button. Um, I would say what helped me was probably, like I said, what I did for a long time was everydays, I call them. That was quite popular before. So I
Mm.
basically, and I did it more towards 2D art, and I can just paint it every day and just post on Instagram.
Okay.
And of course, a lot was just kind of like not that good, but it was kind of cool to see the progression. I think also like taking screenshots. I can show like here, like kind of these screenshots when you kind of
Mm.
work on a scene can be quite rewarding because it's very often you are here where it's I call it the awkward area, and you get kind of like how I never gonna kind of move from here. But then it's kind of cool when you have this kind of like and look at later. So I think reminding yourself, and I'm a lot from I like reflection a lot. So
Mm,
what I try to do when I'm done with a project is do something called a post-mortem. So kind of
mm,
like reassess the project I did, like even personal project. We do it
mm,
a lot in studios, of course, with like people and stuff like that. But I like to do it myself also with my project, and kind of just reassessing and remembering kind of like when I was struggling and stuff like that, and asking a little bit why I was struggling. Um, I think like it comes down to like fundamentals also. Like the more I kind of learn just fundamentals, the more comfortable I get, basically.
totally makes sense. Awesome. So I think there are a couple more questions, guys, that I didn't take. If you want to repost them in a little bit, I do want to move forward just a little bit more so that we can start talking about the bootcamp and start with Jacob's demo. So, Jacob, really quick, just want to ask, who is the bootcamp for?
Yeah, so I would say it's going to be a little bit more on semi intermediate, I would say. Like you probably have done some environment scenes already, and know kind of the basics,
Mm,
but you're maybe not sure what are the important fundamentals. You kind of want to emphasize that. So I would say you have like a portfolio and you want to kind of like know how to maybe like push it forward in terms of both curation in the terms of just pure portfolio, but also your next scene. So I would say you know a little bit modeling. You're comfortable with some of the workflows. I think, of course, all there is always going to be new workflows appearing, so I don't think you need to know all of them. But I
mm,
think being somewhat comfortable, maybe Unreal and stuff like that, can be good.
mm,
But I think also um, um, being open for I want to kind of try to curate it a little bit also as a collaboration. So
okay.
my idea of the course is a little bit that we're gonna have like a Discord channel that is open for everyone in the group, and that everyone has their topic post basically, and we try to like figure out things together, basically feedbacking on each other, posting, and that's gonna also be a space to become a bit more comfortable, maybe posting stuff and learning how to take and give feedback. So I think that's
Awesome.
also a tricky thing to learn,
Mm.
both giving but also receiving.
Well, absolutely. I think all of us have dealt with the awkwardness between trying to tell someone like how they can either improve or how awesome it is, and then hearing other people say the same thing about our own work. And let me ask you, with the students, what do you think they're going to take away from this? And I think you kind of gave it in the last answer, but I just want to kind of cover that.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna really look at the portfolio, trying to look holistic at the portfolio in general, and then look what we want to go, kind of like what is our goals, and build a project towards that. And then in the end of the course, I kind of want to also bring in. So basically, main course is 12 weeks, but then we have 1 week of where we do like an art test. So I'm gonna kind of like prepare an art test, and I know there might be some stylized artists and some more semi-realism artists or realist artists. So I'm gonna kind of curate probably like 2 art tests depending on where you kind of land on that. And then we're gonna kind of like take away the fear maybe of a little bit of art tests also, because that's usually a topic that comes up, and we
Hmm.
can learn a lot from that. And then the last class is going to be just kind of like what we talked about, post-mortem in the group, basically talking
Hmm.
about like the whole project. And I think I want to also show kind of my process when it comes to just general planning in projects, and trying to keep a kind of clean production in portfolio work, which is, I think, even hard for the most kind of um, planned person. But there is
Hmm.
always tools we can use, like doing a very clean blockout, planning for every shot we are planning for, and working in gates, for example, etc.
Yeah, that I can't wait to see what comes out of this. The ending, having the art test at the end is like so good, because I'll tell you, that's one of the things I hear back from a lot of students is like, how what should I expect in an art test, and how do I do the art test? So it's great that we're giving that potential to actually go through one. Um,
Yeah, I can just talk about like my first art test was not that fun because I want to take that away a little bit. Like I did my first art test when I did like the application for Starbreeze,
mhm.
and I worked in indie, so like I barely heard of art test before that, and then I just got the list, and it's like I had 3 days on me to do it, and there was words like textile density, and I'm like, what is that even? And this was like 10 years ago when you couldn't like just YouTube it. I had to like skim through polycount and trying to decipher what polycount is. Sorry, try textile density. So it became very stressful. So I saw that someone is asking about art test and what they are. So it's
Mhm.
basically a tool for a studio to know if you can kind of like, so usually when you get an artist, like visually they are happy what you can do. So like on a visually level, they feel like you are fit for the role to produce what the game is producing. But they want to see under the hood, because of course when we do like portfolio piece, we might cheat a little bit, we might not work properly workflow wise for real proper real-time rendering. So just a tool a little bit to decipher if this artist can kind of like work in a production environment.
Just reading some of the questions. So I just wanted to kind of, we've started asking questions about the boot camp, and I've gotten a couple of really good questions about the boot camp from a couple of students. One student was asking, with boot camp, is this something, if you've already gone through, say, Gap, and you wanted to come back and get improve your skills, would you recommend it for a student that's already gone through the program?
Yeah, I would say so. Like
Mhm.
I would say the Gap project is kind of like just learning the kind of fundamentals, and if you're starting to kind of feel comfortable with them, I'm gonna repeat fundamentals in this course also, because like I said, I'm still kind of keep learning them still to this date. So I think repetition is important. So there's going to probably be a little bit repetition when it comes to modular workflow, text density, um, poly count, etc. But I think totally like you can jump on if you have done Gap already.
Totally. I think it's a good addition to, if you've already gone through Gap, it's a great addition onto what they've already learned. There's another question here asking, now this one I'm not sure if you're going to have the ability to answer this. What if they're unable to make this boot camp? Will there be one later on, or will there be a chance to kind of be able to learn from this?
Great question. I don't I think so. Like we might do another one. I mean, I don't know if that's set in stone, but I think we're probably going to try to do another one, and that's going to probably be done next year, right? Like this one is going until the beginning of next year.
Yeah, so I think it's a great idea. If we do it again, I think there's a high possibility. Um, There is also a question. I think this one, I think we might need to hold off on until later. They're asking about AI. I don't know if we want to save that for
No,
the ending.
no, no. I'm. I kind of knew that the AI question
I think
would
we do.
come. So I'm gonna see. I
It's
think I saw it. Yeah,
from Sawa, or
yeah.
I
So
probably
so
mispronounced that.
so I have a lot of friends that are in the concept field basically. So I know kind of like how their world is a little bit, and I would say still to this point, like concept artists usually. I think when we think of concept artists, we just think of pretty pictures and epic sceneries and stuff like that. But for me, a concept artist is more of a problem solver. They are more of someone that's helping to bridge the gap between kind of what the level design is uh, is uh, is putting into like the restriction of what we can do. So, for example, a good example is competitive shooters are very kind of angle-based shooting games. We can't do whatever we want with like the set dressing and stuff like that. We have to work very flat. So a concept artist is there to kind of like, how do you make a flat surface interesting, basically? And I think those people are still going to be needed. I mean, there's probably going to be studios that are more keen on using AI, some are less. So I think there is going to be a split, basically. But I think also like concept artists that move much over to like 3D concept arting nowadays.
Mhm.
So like the prolific concept artists nowadays are usually use more a 3D workflow. That's kind of what we used in our studio. Basically, that way we could kind of like concept everything and play it right away and see how it felt basically to run around in. And I think like still with AI, it's a very kind of um, like I think like in the game industry is a little bit careful touching it too much, because every time a studio has kind of introduced it, it's been quite pushed back, I would say, from the community. Like I think gamers are a little bit more elected, because it feels like a little bit like a cheap cheap way to get a quick result. So I think there is still going to be some finding there. I think nobody really knows where it lands. But then, of course, like when I've gone around and talked to studios, some use it and some not. And I would say where it's mostly being used then is basically just in kind of mood, kind of the mood section, like the pre-production, mood boards and stuff like that. And then it becomes kind of up to the concept artist to take kind of what doesn't really make sense sometimes and make sense out of it, basically.
And we also got another question about art tests. So this student was asking when turning one in. They're asking for like what do they usually look for? I know it's usually kind of a grab bag depending on the studio, but they're asking like renders, FBX files, those type of things.
We can open it. I have actually my art test on ArtStations. We can open up that. And I can talk about it a little bit. So here we have it. So this is almost 10 years ago. So basically, I'm going to try to remember what the notes was. But one thing I remember was I had a budget of 10,000 triangles. That was like, you're not allowed to go over 10,000 triangles. And I think like the brief was basically, gonna take a print screen here. So it was basically a realistic picture of kind of this wall, I would say, like this, and it was like build an environment out of this, basically. So I did my own kind of like assessment there to, instead of just building a tiny diorama of that wall, I kind of pushed a little bit extra and tried to build a whole scene, basically. And I think that's something I've tried to done every artist is like add a little bit extra to it. So basically, it was text density that needed to be set, basically, and that's something we can always talk about. But basically, set text density files were needed to be FBX. Good naming convention. Like even if the artist doesn't say good naming convention, I would always stress about clean naming convention, clean folder structure when you put that in. And that's something I always push in my portfolio scenes. When I build, I always try to build very clean, because then I don't think about it if I would do an art test. Like it becomes second nature for me. So I would say kind of those things, basically. And then you send in basically all the files, sometimes done real scene to see how it's built together, but usually they want more kind of looking under the hoods. Usually FBX is enough, because then they can check like how you have UV'd everything, what is the poly count, have you used unnecessary poly count, polys and stuff like that. I can bring up actually my avatar or my Ubisoft art test also. Maybe that can be interesting. So that one is like I think I've never showed it because I was not sure if I was allowed to show it before the game came out. So what I did with Ubisoft, like I said, they called me and asked if I wanted to do vegetation, and I said yes, without hesitation. But then I was like, okay, I need to learn vegetation. So and I asked myself also, what would they kind of like really? Because I really wanted a job
Mm.
also. So I asked myself like, what would I kind of like if I had someone come into an interview? And I came up with an idea, which was maybe not that smart because it was a very stressful weekend. I just built like a vegetation scene in Avatar kind of like world and brought that to the interview. And I think maybe it was not the best work, but for them it was like, okay, this person really wants to work here.
Mm.
Um, so I brought that to the interview, and that kind of took away me needing to do an art test. Like I basically, this became my art test basically. So that's that art test. So I would say like can be very kind of like different between art tests. And then to end up the question here, I'm actually setting up. So I'm a ArtStation collection guy. Like I love collections. So I have, and I can share this to everyone. Like I have one for like meditation. So I have one for kind of everything. And I'm doing one for art tests now also. So I can share that one. Um, that one is maybe wrong. So I'm going to start adding into that one also for this course specifically, basically. So that's going to kind of like also show a little bit what the art tests are. But yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. I think that basically gets all of the questions just going through this. There was just one other question, person was asking about what does an environment artist would make, or an example of what they would do as a career. Because I know there are specializations and then there's
Hmm.
environment artist.
Yeah, it's a very kind of broad subject. So another, I'm a like an art station collection guy. I'm also a meter board collection guy. So I do a lot of meter boards. So this one is kind of my Vertex meter board where I kind of like invite everyone. So I kind of have like all the subjects here usually with links of every topic we talk about always. Um, but I have a section here actually that talks about all the
Mm.
different roles basically. So I would probably like mix them up to this basically. So you read usually like level artist, and that's basically environment artist. It's just depending on the studio. Sometimes they are called environment artist, sometimes level artist. Um, and then you have world artist. That's usually more like a senior. That would be like on the Avatar project. That was basically the people did like the world terrain, maybe the skies, but they are called Vista artists sometimes also. I think in Bungie they called Vistas artists, but they are basically doing the more kind of world art basically, and that's more like procedural work and stuff like that. So maybe even moving a little bit towards tech artist. They have prop artist. When I started out, that was quite a lot where Junius kind of landed. Like I did prop art for Walking Dead at the beginning, and then I moved slowly over to environment art. So it's usually like where you kind of like get the footing in because then you kind of learn the fundamentals a little bit. I would say this one has kind of like started to disappear a little because the studio is starting to use more outsourcing that you probably have heard the word of. So nowadays, prop artist is not that common in studios. You maybe have like a more of an expert prop artist, but you don't have like a bunch of prop artists. That's usually more outsourced nowadays. Then material slash texture artist, they are the people that sit in designer and just kind of like create the materials for the environment artist. And that's usually one person, maybe two people, because you don't want to kind of mix styles. So it's very important
Mm.
that it's kind of like a set person that's doing it. And a lighting artist, that's something that's become very popular recently. Like before, it was usually like one of the artists got to do it, but now it's a kind of a career on its own because now you can do much more with lighting also, like budget wise, I think. So that becomes its own role basically. And then you have vegetation artists. That's kind of what I became. So basically building just vegetation, but you can also land into doing doing rocks and stuff like that. So organic artist basically. And then lastly, tech artist is usually kind of the person who's building kind of the tools for the artist, or maybe finding procedural ways of doing stuff. So that could be through like Houdini, or Unreal has their own procedural stuff. And what I mean with procedural stuff is basically if you build like a giant forest, you don't want to place every plant single-handedly. That would take a very long time. I actually talked to kind of like a 3D friend who worked early in the industry, and he hand placed the grass in a car game one time. So it was like hand placed every grass card for
Mhm.
a car game where everyone just passed through the grass basically. But nowadays it's basically just you build like maybe a chunk of 500 meters, and you create like a rule set in those 500 meters, and then you say spread this out in kilometers basically.
Mm.
And stuff like that could be what a tech artist does. And tech artists, they usually can focus on our role, so they can focus on just pure lighting. At my old place, we had one just focusing on material work, for example, or tool sets. So we had one just building tools for us, basically. So yeah, I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, that most definitely did. And I can see you also have a bit of a tree going up to how the different positions and elevations work within the company for going from junior up to creative director.
Exactly. So this is just to see a little bit how it's gonna branching off, because you read these always. So basically, you start as a junior, and then I would say it's usually like 2, 3 years later you become intermediate, or just environment artist it's called usually.
Mm.
And then usually I think it's like 6 years. Sometimes it can go faster, but I would say like big studios usually 6 years for senior. And then the big one is here basically, where it says principal wrongly spelled. I can see now it's principal artist. Um, Basically principal artist and lead artist. So before it was always like senior artist became lead artist, but they were more artist than kind of working in leadership. So it kind of never really worked out. So it was a bit unfair for them. Like some people just want to make art basically. So this has kind of become a way of some people that just want to make art can kind of like consider kind of go towards that instead, and then the people that want to do leadership and development of the team and stuff like that can move over to lead artists basically. And then I would say like art director is usually like overseeing basically. It can be kind of team based also. Like sometimes you have an environment art director and a character art director, but usually it's like overseeing the art, kind of making sure that the art is just keeping consistent, and creative director is more kind of overseeing the whole studio. What are we standing for as a studio? Are we a stylized studio? Do we use AI or not? Like those
Mm.
questions are usually the creative director, I would say.
All right, awesome. And I think we have a couple more questions, but I really think we should probably move on to the demo because I don't want to waste our time too much going too far into things. Um, so we've already taken questions. So at this point, um, if you're okay with starting up with the demo,
Yeah,
if we could jump into that.
I can see I also have a dead pixel here. I think bit annoying.
Oh
Uh,
no.
I'm a bit worried that that just appeared now, but hopefully it's gonna disappear when I restart. Yeah, so I was thinking a little bit what should I do as a demo, and I'm all for kind of fundamentals. So I kind of want to just show how I start a project. I think in a clean way, basically. So how do I kind of like go from idea to my kind of early conceptual idea, and knowing if I want to kind of keep working on that project. Um, so I think like there is of course a way of kind of jumping into ArtStation and looking for concept art and building from that. And I'm not going to show that now. I think this is going to kind of be similar. I kind of want to go more of a more world-based uh, way, and that would be kind of like we built a game that takes place like the recent Mafia game is a good kind of example. Like that's using, I saw they posted a lot of that recently. But the new Mafia game kind of like did a lot of like more kind of realistic stuff, and they are usually based that on reality basically. So one way is of course going to Pinterest, and Pinterest has like usually a quite good way of just finding interesting aspects. So I love Pinterest. It become a little bit trickier because now it's kind of like a little bit just kind of like just same AI stuff over and over again. So it kind of like becomes kind of flooded of just not uniqueness anymore. But I mean, like these things are, I love them. And the cool thing with Pinterest for me is like you can kind of like see a curated. You can see kind of my current interest here basically because this is my start page. So you can see I'm looking at cars for a reason. Not gonna say why. And I'm looking at buildings, and I'm looking at. Just repainted my office, so that's why I have a lot of kind of like office pictures also. But it's a very cool way of just kickstarting the inspiration mind basically. So I like to always jump into Pinterest, and I would say here usually maybe an idea can start. Uh, I mean, like just one of these corner shops, and when I click this, I get kind of like a plethora of other cool, like um, visual ideas basically. And what I like to do is think a little bit like a classical painter. So I learned that classical painters in the past, they always painted very small because when you walked into a showroom or a museum, like you see the painting very small. So they always have to think about how is the picture gonna look when you are the furthest away. So I kind of try to do that approach when I'm here also because the pictures are quite small here. So I kind of look at this picture and I'm just going for what feels interesting as a first read, which means that it has good fundamentals basically. It has interesting aspects to it. So I would usually just sit and kind of right click and open here. And that can be one way of me starting a project basically. And usually I kind of just fill up a big amount of ideas this way. But I want to show another way. And something I used a lot at Walking Dead, because that game took place in Washington D.C. was I really wanted to kind of get a feeling of being in that place. So I basically every morning on my morning coffee at work, I just dropped down in Washington D.C. and drove around basically with my imagining car. And I realized you can get so much storytelling that feels very kind of like believable because Google Maps is like snapshots from everyday life because it's a car driving through everyday life. So I kind of instead of like I love traveling, but traveling is not always the possibility. So I travel a lot through Google Maps when I look for concepts or ideas. And sometimes I can just kind of drop down and just look for interesting aspects. We are in Poland here now, and I would kind of just go around until I kind of see interesting things, and then I usually just save the location. So this is kind of like how, for example, my Coletti bar was made. So during class, we basically just traveled around in Palermo and found this kind of interesting bar. And then we also found this one. So we did two ones, and this one South Korea. So this one is also kind of currently being worked on. Um, and the nice thing is like with Google Maps. So I actually cheated a little bit because I would sit here for maybe an hour, look for the perfect house. So I actually went above before class now and found a house I kind of liked. So I kind of jumped here to Greece. So I would say this is a kind of one that piques my interest basically because it has like interesting material definition, a bit like Mafia now, like the new Mafia game that was on ArtStation, maybe a bit inspired by that. So another thing I really like with Google Maps is that we get basically a camera of reference. So we can kind of look around and get a lot of information here. Even if it's not like high resolution, we still get quite good resolution here. Another aspect I really like is that we can get the building in different lighting scenario. And I would say like at some places you get really good cameras, but here you get kind of like basically a time capsule, which I love. And you get also some new ideas. So we have the red truck. That's a very kind of like eye-catching thing. Like just seeing that, I want that in my scene basically. So I would say we are gonna build this one. So what I would do now basically is kind of going into a blockout stage. So the nice thing with Google Maps is that we can almost like position ourselves dead front here and just use that as our reference. So, and the nice thing with this building is it's kind of like mirrored. So I'm going to just take half of it. And Paul, if there is kind of questions or if I go too fast, just let me know. Like if
Okay.
anyone is wondering anything.
So far, we've only gotten something, one student was saying they had made a house and a roof, and they had a little bit of a hard time. No questions yet.
Awesome. But yeah, if I go too fast with anything, like just let me know, and I'm happy
Will
to
do.
to. So I'm gonna just do this kind of like so we have like so I'm basically creating a 2D image for our blockout. And now like we can already kind of start with maybe building a little bit of nice and kind of folder structure. So I'm going to just call this grease. And I think that's misspelled. Yeah, it's like that. I love Googling words in English, so I always get them right. So I always try to like naming conventions and stuff like that. I always try to double check them, especially in projects. So it's not like you sending over something that's kind of like wrongly spelled and stuff like that. So it's kind of like good to always kind of keep that. So we do reference.
So I do have one question. So it was
Yeah.
just asking if Pinterest and Google Maps is, let me see, would you say Pinterest and Google Maps are a good way of gathering reference and choosing a concept?
So I would say it's one way of doing it. Like it depends on the kind of what you're interested in. Of course, if you want to do like medieval stuff, it's a bit harder to use Google Maps. Then it would probably be Pinterest. Or I have one student that's kind of doing. Let's see, do we have that still? Yeah, here. So I had one student so doing kind of like a temple, like Assassin's Creed Shadow, a little bit focused. And I think like something that's very important when building stuff is like finding good reference and basing on that. And it's both like in terms of like this kind of like zoomed out and just kind of like metrics. But later I need to find like these materials when I build them. I need like close-ups. So it's either traveling there or just finding good high resolution image. So I had a student doing kind of like a temple basically, or not a temple, but a smaller shrine basically in a bamboo forest. And a website I really like is Flickr. I use it a lot for vegetation creation. So Flickr is basically people uploading like high resolution image of just things basically. So you get like these very high resolution images and you can usually download the source file. It's amazing when you want to kind of like create the detail work later in production basically. So Flickr is kind of like my reference hunting board. Um, so here, for example, we found a Shinto shrine here, album, uh, and like these pictures were kind of like perfect for kind of just kind of like how is dirt building up in kind of like the creases of the places, or where is kind of like wood changing color? Like, is it wood is probably not the same color up and down because of like nature, rain, and weathering. So it just gives you a very kind of clear picture of when you're kind of building textures or just pure modeling. So I would say like Flickr is amazing for that. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. And there was one other question. I think this is going to be something while you're doing the blockout. They
Yeah.
were asking for tips to help align roofs and walls.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be kind of the main
Yeah.
topic, but for some reason Maya. So and that can also be maybe a question. Also, is like I use Blender and Maya. Like I usually get the questions like I know there's some Blender users, and it's totally fine to use either Blender or Maya. Like at 3ds Max, I've said I don't know that much. And I usually get the question about is Maya like industry, sorry, is Blender industry standard? Can you use it? And I would say yes. Like at Ubisoft Stockholm, we used Blender. At my past place, we used Blender. The reason why I use Maya is mainly because so many students are using Maya. So I kind of teach with Maya usually. But I would say when you know one modeling software, you can kind of learn every modeling software. And then there is aspects I like with Maya and aspects I like with Blender. So it's kind of like, seems like my exposure worked now also. So Maya broke it or something.
Oh my God.
So yeah, that pixel is gonna annoy me so much. But yeah, first thing I always do is before anything, kind of getting a character in. So I have this starter content, and I would suggest everyone to do that. So this folder I bring to every computer I work on, and this has like everything I need, every plugin, every brush preset for my like ZBrush or Photoshop or anything. And here I have like characters basically. So I have this like 180 characters. So I always bring those in to start. And another thing I like to do is basically if we make a floor here. I get the feeling always like Maya lighting is a bit sad, basically. So what I like to do is set up Maya lighting before working. So I go here to kind of like rendering and click these two buttons. And I'm gonna position that and put it to the side. And then I can just click this one, and this one. And then I just get some kind of like shadows. And I think it really helps when you're doing kind of modeling to have shadows, because then you get just a better sense of like thickness, depth, and stuff like that. So I always kind of model with like this kind of basic lighting setup. So we can bring on the grid, and the grid question is always like a big one. So my units here are basically a meter each, so you can see, and sorry for all the, like it's 100 centimeters. And the reason why I talk meters and centimeters is just that Unreal as a software uses that as its metrics basically. So we can just think it that as 100 or 1 basically. So this one is 2 meters basically, these two columns basically. And then I can kind of like, let's see. So nice, Maya is freezing again. One thing is I'm actually ordering a new computer, so hopefully I'm not gonna have computer, because I had a lot of computer problems the past weeks. So hopefully I'm getting a new computer fairly soon. So I'm gonna just close down Designer there, and hopefully it's gonna work. It can be actually. Let me just check one thing. It's not my hard drive. But yeah, let's quickly just add in the character. Now we're gonna kind of go a little bit faster. So we have starter content. And then we can just add in the lighting. rendering, click these two, scroll them. These I usually put to the side and I can lock them behind a label here. I can't accidentally click them. And now we can just bring in our reference. So I'm going to go here to image reference plane and we put it here. That's not that picture. Let's see. So we did a new folder. So what I would do right away is basically make a quick selection folder for it. So I'm going to put it here in, let's see, in quick access, like here. So I can jump to it quickly. And then the question is like, okay, how should we think about this building basically? So when we work in 3D, we usually try to really work with our grid. It's very important. The reason is that it's going to keep consistency between every artist. So if everyone just gets to do their own door in different metrics, they're never going to fit, or walls or roofs for that matter. So it really helps to keep a consistent workflow between every artist. And then it's a little bit like Legos. Like you basically get to build together stuff, and if every piece is different, they are not going to fit basically. So you always kind of want to think about that beforehand. So what I like to do is like always start with like a door if we have a door available. And I think we're going to make this door just a meter wide and then 2 meters tall. And I snap a lot to the grid, so I hold in the X here. And the nice thing, like me snapping to the grid here, I can also like jump between like grid stages here. So that's just cutting the grid in half always, which makes me be able to kind of like half the meters basically. So this building, for example, looks like it could work as a half meter there instead, and a half meter here, and that would be like if we count here, for example, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be 9 meters wide if we put it like this, or it's going to be 8 in between, and then we do a half section. And I'm thinking already like kits basically a little bit beforehand. So I'm kind of like thinking already about like how I want to kits. So these walls are going to kind of be flat planes kits basically. And down the corners, we're going to kind of like make a section for the corners. And I just want to kind of show like just saying kits maybe it's not. So I just want to show what I mean with like kits here quickly. So when I talk about kits, it's kind of like these things. So this is how we build up kind of levels always. And these are always kind of like usually a section of 2, basically 2 meters, 4 meters, 8 meters. And then we can have this kind of corner piece that is a half meter. And the corner pieces are quite nice because then we can kind of like detail sides and we can switch them out. So if we want like a damage side, we can kind of switch that out. So that's kind of the idea there.
I had a quick question from one of the students about your keybind.
Yeah.
For changing the grid. They're asking if it was your keybind or if it's one that's default with the with Maya.
It's my keybind. It's basically it's a plugin, and I think there is a polycount thread where I can link where you can set up that. But you can set up keybinds. Where is it?
I think it's in preferences.
Yeah, it's like hotkeys, and this one always loads very slowly. And something I talk a lot about because I had like problems with my hands. Like I had like carpal syndrome, which is like not fun. So I try to make kind of like all the buttons very kind of accessible for me. So I one thing I've done with Blender, for example, is kind of like completely change that keybind wise. Because that way because I'm always kind of a bit scared of bending my hands too much, basically. So I'm a very kind of like setting up keybinds, especially like Blender is very nice to do it. I'm gonna turn that off. So what I'm doing now is just mapping out the entrances. And when I think of environment scenes, I kind of like always like just try to be as lazy as possible. So I'm gonna kind of just work on half of this because I can just copy it over later. So we have the front side here now. Can maybe even start adding in kind of the idea of the building here. But the building is probably not this flat. So let's jump back to our reference. And then I can just go back to Greece here and look. For me, it looks like it's kind of like half the building or something like that. And I would say like I try to kind of like, of course, be as accurate as possible, but also like just I would say testing it out, like because if we're not there, we can just kind of like try to build as accurate as possible, but it's never going to be 100%. And another aspect is like when we work with environment art, we're not building architecture renders, we are building pieces for a video game. So I would say if you really closely look at video games, sometimes it's actually a little bit wonky how, like, doors is a very good example. Doors are very very big usually because camera needs to move on under it basically if it's a third person game. Um, so we always try to like mimic reality as much as possible, but we can't always do one by one, and it's gamer experience is more important than being 100% correct. So I can see there is a window there also. Yeah, so I'm kind of creating these to kind of like just map out all the entrances. And we have the roof. Um, so this is also this is like mirroring. This is a command. This is Maya, part of Maya, but it's a command. I can link that also. But it's basically a mirror tool, basically. Um, so I think at this point, I want to introduce also a little bit like colors and stuff like that. So when I work, I don't try to like add textures and stuff like that too early, but I think it's good to have representation of the texture you kind of want to do. So I use work very simple, like with Lamberts, because I think having those early on, especially like when we light later, is always going to be nice. So I'm going to do plaster white. Can move that up for now. Now the fun part comes. I'm going to try the booleans in Maya, but I feel like it never works. So we're going to see if it works now. Yeah, this is kind of a booleans, and I would say their Blender is so much kind of stronger. So I'm going to show what I usually do. So what I tend to do instead is just building my own kind of like pieces here quickly. So I use a lot is basically snapping to vertices and then scaling towards it, because then I can get very kind of like accurate. It's basically can't move further, so it's gonna always gonna snap there. Where I just snap with X basically. And what I can do now is basically just I'm gonna start with this side. So I'm flipping with Control Shift I there. So I'm just gonna build this together now a little bit. And also here, I'm gonna just bring back the image. Thinking already about me building the kit pieces. So I'm gonna building those into my Blockout here. And that just comes with kind of like done Blockouts for a while. Then it becomes a little bit more like you kind of speeding through, not having to rethink the Blockout again, basically is the idea. We can add an edge loop here also. So I'm holding in X to kind of snap here, and then I just create kind of like a clean setup here. So I have that wall, and we can even give that wall a material now. And here I make sure to always name them. And delete this one. So this is like a wall stone. Do like a bit of a kind of a brown here. And Paul, if there is questions, just let me know. Because I'm not seeing them right now. If there is questions being asked.
Apologies, I had my mic muted. One question was, are modular pieces usually the way environments are done?
I would say to 95% every studio is using them basically. So I would say here we're looking at one of the like pure fundamentals of environment work. They can differ a little bit. So sometimes you build them as these type of pieces, and sometimes it's more maybe you build like whole buildings, and the windows and the doors are just the kit pieces. So it can differ a little bit there. But every studio using them. And the reason is that if we build these, and later we're going to cut them up, and I can jump into a scene that is a little bit more further ahead later and show kind of like why we do it. Because the nice thing is if we, for example, make one of these windows a kit piece, then we just work on that, and later when we have set everything up, all of these fours are going to be updated basically at the same time. So it becomes a very powerful tool to work fast, basically. And then it comes down to also like tiling. So that's another subject. Tiling textures are more easy to kind of like work with when we are working in clean metrics, basically. I think the big aspect is basically like usually in a studio you have like a giant amount of people working on the same levels, and then you need to make sure that everyone are aligned with each other, basically. So I'm gonna kind of snap here, and we can give this, can maybe even separate that, and then give this the M stone. Can we half this? And this is what I love with especially these type of buildings, is like we just need to work on half of this. And let's say we just do the backside for now being flat. So now we have that figured out, and then we are at the roof now. So what I'm going to do is jump back to my picture. I'm going to kind of just somewhat scale this towards here. Sorry if you hear there's a motorcycle outside.
And there was one other question, Jacob. Somebody was asking about your metrics for size of different wall pieces. I told them 2 meters, 4 meters, 8 meters, and then half meter corners.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of about it. Sometimes it can be nice to make them a meter, also at the corners. So I would say that depends a little bit on the kind of what you're doing and stuff like that. But for me, the nice thing then, like if we have a half meters, it becomes a little bit more of a realistic thickness of the buildings, basically. Sometimes some studios are just making this a piece, basically, like this window piece, and tuck them together. But the problem then is that we get like a harsh line here between these two pieces. So it's nice to have that kind of like side piece that we can play with. So for example, for this brick wall, we could kind of model a very detailed brick. So another technique there is either to do that straight in that kit piece, or we do something called like a floater. So you would have like rocks floating above, basically, that we place above. But then they can only like extrude. So I kind of like this method because then we can go inwards also. Roof, we're gonna add a roof texture also. Gonna wanna get into Unreal also. So I really push to get comfortable in your engine, basically. So I would recommend everyone to kind of like always be in Unreal. So when I work, I always have Unreal and Maya open, basically, and work with them like combined. So I think we can start already. So we can do like gonna see what the floor was here. So we have a little bit mud and grass. So we can start with grass maybe, and then we're gonna so grass. So I'm gonna also show the Maya exporter, which is very nice because I usually it's very common to just do export, and I'm gonna show a very nice method to do it. So I'm gonna do gravel here or mud and mud. Of course, like usually when we export, we just click the export button, and my export button looks like this. Maybe a little bit different for everyone here. I use kind of like Windows native because I like to have the quick buttons here. So I'm just going to quickly show how I get that because I get that question sometimes. So it's in preference and then file and project. And then I just use OS native basically instead of Maya default. And the reason is just I feel like just Windows is cleaner to work with. So we can either do that, like export like this, and then we would go to our grease folder. I would set up like a mesh folder maybe, Blockout, and then we do always start with SM, so stands for static mesh. So we always, all the static meshes, we always have the prefix SM, and that's just to kind of organize better and find stuff better. Then we can just do Blockout house. So that's one way of doing it. We could also group this. And I'm going to open up my Unreal so we have that loaded because I'm going to start a new scene here. So I'm going to use 5.6 here. I like to usually use third person, like to see kind of the character next to the environments.
I have a quick question from one of the students, Jacob.
Yeah.
They were asking about, as an environment artist, are you mainly working mid poly, and is there high poly and low poly incorporated? Is that just for for hero props?
I would say like here, high poly is kind of like disappearing a little bit, I would say, because
Mhm.
of production time. I would say mid poly has become much more kind of popular because it's a very fast workflow, not having to like build a high poly, low poly, bake it, put it in engine, and then you have art director who's not happy with it, so you have to go back to like the beginning. So it's a very kind of like not so tangible workflow. So mid poly is much faster because you're basically building a low poly and then you're just beveling it, adding weighted normals, and you get kind of like very close to like a high poly visually. But you cannot take away the step of the whole like baking process and stuff like that, that aspect. I would still say like some assets, like hero assets, weapons, and stuff like that, are still using that workflow. But I would say like environment art, like we do more filler props, like filler assets, like filling the scenes. So we usually would work just mid poly with those. And then like if we introduce nanite also, like then we can maybe even like just do pure high poly with like bake texture. But there comes caveats with nanite and a high poly, pure high poly also. Like UV mapping that is a little bit more cumbersome, etc. I hope that answered the question.
I think that answered it very well. Would all or most environment meshes be static meshes?
Good question. Yes, I would say. Oh, I did a mistake here. So you can see all these kind of went in as single objects. I'm gonna kind of show how we want to do this. I would say most, but of course we have maybe like a lantern, like maybe some more kind of like objects that are bound to the characters. Those would not be static. But if we take, for example, a flag post, maybe the flag arm is still static, and then we build it together in Unreal as a blueprint. So the flag itself is maybe has their animations to it, but the flag post is maybe like static. And then it's like more of an animated object basically, and they have their prefix for it. So here, when I do my first object, I want to do combine meshes. I want to take out I like to take away textures and materials. I don't want that to be kind of imported. And for now, I kind of like turn off the nanite to speed up things basically. I was creating a. So here I'm going to set up the same naming convention as I have in Windows. So I'm going to want to keep that on track. And already here we have our first problem. And that's why I like to kind of work towards Unreal. I kind of realize problems that way, because here is what the viewer is going to see. They are not going to see Maya. So I always kind of work in this engine basically, because then I know, okay, I flip this, so I need to kind of combine it and separate it. So I basically just did kind of mirror flipping, and that negative scaled it, so it's flipped here. So if I do now, it's going to be fixed. So we can just what I usually like to do is do a source file instead, because if we import other things, we're gonna get kind of like their project files. So I like to have like my own project file, so it's not interfering with like stuff I'm importing. So I'm gonna do a material folder, and here I'm just gonna do a like just a blockout color master material. So we can just right click here and promote parameter, put this on kind of gray, and I like to do it on the roughness also. So these parameters are basically almost like a slider for my material instance. So here we create our materials, and of course these are going to be kind of like explained a little bit slower if we sit down with this, but I right click on it and create a material instance, and now I can start kind of doing kind of the grass. Can add that on the surface. The grass color here. I kind of want that a little bit less saturated. We can do a mi mod. And I really like to set up these kind of base colors quite early because lighting is so defined by material, like the base color of the materials. So I tend to do my lighting quite early. So if I have this set up early, I get a very kind of like accurate representation later when I move over to like doing tileable textures. Basically, things are not going to change that much. Basically, is the idea. So we do a mi all stone. That was a little bit like brownish. And it's maybe don't feel so exciting kind of doing kind of these steps, but for me it's so kind of like nice just having a clean setup early on. Like we have the building now, so technically we could like jump in here and run, and it doesn't work now, so I'm going to show that like a trick here. So basically when we work we get collision here. The collision auto generates basically, so we can't kind of run to the house. So with like blockouts, I like to just auto generate kind of my collision. So I go to compilation or collision complexity here and just use the mesh. So of course, like later in the project, we're not going to do that for our main objects, but when we kind of like test out things, it's very fast to be able to run around, and we are spawning inside of the house. So the spawner is here, so we're going to move that out. So now we can kind of like position it towards the house. And we can start testing kind of like does the metrics feel nice, etc. Now I have a link between Maya and Unreal, and already now like I feel like I want to set up a camera also, because in the end that's going to be for a video game. We of course make it more kind of like based on like running around and feeling like the play space, but we are building a portfolio. So I'm going to do camera main. So our camera lens is going to be the the main presentation later. So I like to kind of do like a 35 millimeter, maybe start with that. And just position the building a little bit from below. Then we get kind of like a nice ground here later. Just setting up like a first camera very early on, and then just locking that. Because then I can start thinking of composition also. And now I have a merge between these two softwares basically. So we had a car here also. I think that could be kind of interesting to add in as a first kind of blockout mesh. So gonna see. So this comes down to a little bit like creating proxy models, I call them, or like white box modeling. So we're gonna just put this car on my side screen here, so I see it. It's a bit. See if I can jump here and see it. Yeah, like that. And with a little bit more time, I would probably like sit down and research the car, kind of build like a reference board. Like if I would sit down and work on this scene kind of completed, I would kind of find maybe a blueprint, but we're gonna do it a bit quicker now, so I'm gonna kind of like eyeball it, which I would not recommend to do. But let's see here. I've done a couple of cars, so I have somewhat of a grasp how they are metric wise. Like a human size. So these are like last famous words, and then we get. And the idea is not to have something like beautiful. Um, for me, this is almost like more kind of sketching, similar to what you see like an ugly sketch that maybe a concept artist is doing. We are just figuring out things. So I think it's maybe this. We are just kind of like building kind of like a representation of the car, basically, like a very simple representation of the car. Make it a little bit bigger. And very easy to kind of start moving into like details and trying to like solve things with it and stuff like that. But I try to like always somewhat keep it simple at this point. And then later, of course, I move over and create a more detailed version of this car, like even before moving over to like the modeling phase. But at this point, it's more about just having kind of like a car representation in the scene, basically. Paul, if there is any new questions, just let me know. I think you are maybe muted.
Sorry. I'm in New York, so always noise. So one thing I think might be interesting, there's no new questions, but with all these materials that you're putting onto these models, I know they're creating material slots. I think it might be interesting to talk about that in regards to Unreal Engine.
Yeah, so one thing, so this car is giant. So I'm gonna I think it's gonna be this size. It's gonna be like a human. So my recommendation when doing a car would be to like find a blueprint of it. Like you can just find the car name and then a blueprint and then just model, similar how we did the building. But what I wanted to show here is the game exporter, which is an amazing tool. So we exported like normally, and now I want to show kind of like if I do car, it's actually a truck, I think we would call this. I go here and then game exporter, this. So this is a tool like not having to like export always. So I'm going to show like the problem we might face. So if I export this truck now, basically, so I'm going to show that here. And we place it here in our Blockout folder. And I think I accidentally clicked in nothing here, this one. So I can't delete that, and that's because I'm probably not going to be able to delete this now. Yeah, it worked. So you can see like the pivot is kind of like all wonky here. And that's basically because like the pivot in Unreal is always bound to like here, like the pivot in central Maya. So when exporting, we need to move the car always to the middle, basically, to have a nice pivot in Maya or in Unreal. So what can be nicer to do is using, usually we have plugins for this in Studios. So just getting kind of like a plugin, but the Maya has a really nice one. So what this does is basically we can set up export settings here, and this move to origin is going to basically, before exporting, move it and then move it back. And you're not going to see it. It's going to be like in a very fast manner. Another nice thing with this one is we can set presets. So I'm going to add our SM underscore here. So I don't need to even think about it. And I see it down here, SM truck. And then I just set the folder. So we go to grease, mesh, and our blockout folder. And now it's going to have the truck already. But let's see if the pivot was fixed. So right now, the pivot looks like this. And now we have a fixed pivot. So now we can kind of start positioning the car. And then to talk about like material slots. So if I go in here, I made 2 material slots here. And I named them also in Maya. So they're going to have the name here. So that way I can kind of go into our blockout material. and I can do like a car red here and add that to the red here. That's the wrong one. We want to use the material instances. So I'm going to actually move the master away so I don't accidentally copy that over. So I'm going to put that there. And usually what I have is like I have like a preset scene already with all these kind of like materials already ready. So I have like a library. So technically you just have to set it up one time and then you can kind of like reuse it forever. But it's very nice to have like all these colors. And sometimes it can be nice to name them like maybe the material they're gonna be, depending on how you want to organize. Sometimes I just do like the pure color and kind of reusing that. And already like me being in the engine now, like I can start kind of thinking about like how I want to kind of position the car to kind of add that into the storytelling. Like maybe even start thinking of like a secondary shot, maybe from above. So just being in here with like a very simple blockout can create kind of like a way to start kind of like planning a little bit about shot composition and stuff like that. So maybe like above shot here to see a little bit of the roof, like we can kind of like add storytelling in the trunk. Maybe we can have an open door. So we can kind of start thinking of like the ideas here. And those are going to be kind of the next kind of part of the blockout would be kind of like to start incorporating those ideas into the blockout, but still keeping kind of like all the aspects quite clean.
So
Yeah.
there's a quick question. So one of the students is asking, how do you approach an original environment where you don't have any reference that you can line up and set?
Are you thinking like a concept art then?
I think they're asking if you approach this without any references, or like if there's any time that you do that where you don't have like a concrete reference to go off of.
So I think like I guess it would be like concept art. Like I would still kind of just go for the like I usually go for the door. So I look, is there doors? And usually if it's concept art, they place characters in. But then of course it becomes much more like guessing game basically. One technique that can be quite nice is if you have a concept and you just take the character. Sorry, I'm gonna do another color here. You can use the character as a measurement stick. So like in a concept, you just paint out the character and they are usually like 180. And I just count like, okay, the building is 3 characters high basically. And I just bring up this nifty calculator and do 1.8 times 3. So it's like 5.4. And we probably want to make it like 5 or 6 basically. Because we don't want like an awkward number like that. So that's kind of like how I would go about it. But then I think even like concept art, like let's say we have like a Viking village concept art, then I would probably like still try to start doing some own kind of like research in terms of reference from maybe kind of reincarnate what you call them like fairies and stuff like that, where you kind of like have Viking towns. Quite this place is quite cool in French castle. Like for example, this one I know that Kingdom Come used a lot when they built their game. So this is basically a castle in French being built traditionally. So it's been done like the past 25 years, I think it's been built. and they built it traditionally, so you can visit and stuff like that. And here you get like very accurate reference, right? Because they are building it like they would build, kind of like they would build it past. Because a lot of like the knowledge has gone away, but this way they found it basically again. So being kind of smart how to navigate. So if I would build a castle, I would probably like look at documentaries and videos of this place, for example, or other castles, and then etc. Basically. I hope that answered the question.
I think it absolutely did.
So I could sit here and do this the whole evening because I love doing this, but I might jump to a scene that's a bit more advanced, basically, or a little bit more ahead. But what I would do here now is basically just keep modeling, kind of adding in the story beats I'm talking about. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Um, so what I would do now basically is adding like a processor. I like to kind of lock the exposure because I'm just going to work outside. We need to add infinite extents here. So it's cooperating the whole scene. And then I just work with like an HDRI here. But just this kind of like being in Unreal and forcing myself to like to work inside of the engine is something I always like. I always think of the end product basically. So we add a little bit of fog here. I'm gonna push it back a little bit now, like a bit foggy. But that just kind of like starts kind of like also makes me kind of start thinking of composition and just storytelling. So this red truck is probably going to be kind of my tool to tell a story basically. So I'm thinking maybe I'm going to have that as the main kind of subject of the storytelling basically. Um, Maybe an open door. I thought it was very interesting with this place also having kind of like just a random door standing here, and my guess would be that there was like a balcony here at some point. But um, what we can do is basically jump to a scene that's a little bit more forward. So I'm going to jump to basically one scene I did during another class. So it's basically this scene. So this is South Korea, if I remember correctly. So basically, student got to pick two regions, and we like traveled around until we found something interesting. Um, so here is basically when it becomes a little bit more kind of reference hunt. So a couple of things I like to do is jumping to if it's a place that sells stuff, they always have like a TripAdvisor, pick all the picture from there. I might go to Instagram and search the place, try to find as much as possible information, but then also infusing a little bit of my own, of course. But the more we kind of have just an act like capturing this place, the better basically, because there is a reason why I kind of we picked it, because it felt interesting from the start basically. So capturing those aspects, and then the idea with this project is kind of like leaning towards the arcane style basically. So that's something I always do also, or recommend everyone, is basically having a benchmark scene to strive for, because it's very hard to kind of determine the style. I would say like that's usually something an art director do in a studio. So I would say always try to like build towards kind of like a game or a product basically, because then we can kind of like analyze it and we can build towards it basically, especially in the beginning, I would say. So I saw there was a question there quickly about like the new level. Sorry, I went a bit faster. I basically created a new level. Um, and I can just show another thing I like to do here in Unreal. I use levels a lot. So I'm gonna jump back here and go source. I want to show this quickly, or I actually have it in this scene, I think. Uh, so I'm gonna show it here because this is a bit forward. So with levels, I can create different levels and I can add like the lighting in here. So I can like turn off and on the lighting. So it seems like I forgot to move these lightings over to this level. So I can take this light, right click and move it to here. So I like because then I can with this method I can kind of like add different lighting scenarios. So I could do like a night scene also. So I really like these level sections. I know they have a new system, but I cannot keep the level system still. So here we are a little bit more like advanced, I would say, and I'm gonna jump into the Maya file to show a little bit how that's set up with the scene now. So here we can see like the naming conventions is all kind of like set and clean. So I don't have to bother about that anymore. Everything has like good pivots. So at this point, I can just have fun with the art basically. I might want to kind of like add some more story beats with this one. I feel like could be something on this wall maybe, maybe something on this bench maybe. So I might move over to like I sit and paint a little bit and figure out some aspects that might work. But in general, I would say now I have like all the assets basically as props basically. And the nice thing with that, same here with like kits basically, everything is like cut into pieces and everything kind of fits. So I would say I take away the boring parts basically in my mind. So I have everything lined up here, and then now I can kind of like sit and kind of like work on them like separately, like the coffee. And this is a bit more like a stylized scene, so it has a little bit more of that kind of like silhouette work already, like in the blockouts a little bit. So you can see they are a little bit more silhouetted and stuff like that. And a tip I use a lot when I do like stylized is like kind of just turn off the lighting when doing silhouettes. We can stylize it a little bit more. So I can use the like this. And then I want to see how this looks. Then I go just to the game exporter. And then I can just re-import it. And this doesn't work anymore because this is Unreal 26. So there is a reason why I was in 22 here. So one tip is like the game export doesn't work for me in 26. And I haven't solved why. So good to know. So it's going to be kind of like basically corrupted files basically. So I still work in 22 basically, and that's classic Maya also, I would say. But yeah, basically I separate the files now. So here I have a prop file, and then I have a kit piece file. So I can jump to that quickly. I think it's probably here. So I'm gonna save this one. So here I basically have everything kind of kit pieces basically, and I line them up like this when I'm kind of like building them. And then I can kind of like really focus on each piece basically. And I can open another scene that's even a little bit forward here, so we can jump to that. So one thing I do is I work on a lot of projects. I have a bunch of personal projects because I have a very busy brain, so I like to do new things. But then I set like one main project that I'm gonna kind of like finish in a certain deadline, basically. But we can jump to this, which has like starting to have like a little bit like blockout textures from designer in it. So this would be the next step, basically. So here we have like all the pieces basically. And that means that basically if we don't want a window here, we can just swap that out by not having a window, for example. And that's the whole kind of like aspect of kit pieces, that we can swap out these. And these are vertex painted now, so we would need to like vertex paint these if we wanted them to be the same color. But yeah, that's kind of the power of, so we could build like a giant house with all these pieces. And like if you think like the Division games, for example, there's so many buildings, so we need to kind of like keep it quite like organized. And in those here we kind of hand place them, but in those games you usually have like a builder where you can apply your kit pieces in, and then you can kind of like generate buildings. A last thing like with the camp I want to show is that usually when I work with like students, I like to work on one project myself to kind of show process. So I'm going to kind of do that during the camp, and the project is going to be this building basically I'm going to kind of work on. So it's going to be a bit focused on vegetation, but a lot of kit. It's a Swedish painter's house from the early 1900s basically. So this is going to kind of be part of the game camp, also me building this, and I'm going to set up, so kind of seeing my processes through the weeks also. But yeah, I hope this showed a little bit how I start a project basically. And then of course there is a stretch of a lot of work between that, so we can I jump to my early scene Kyoto cafe here. I think I have kind of like what we did today basically, and then it kind of just gets figured out. Then it turns into a project. I think here I maybe don't add like the last ones. I think here it's the last one. So we basically went here basically. So I would start adding mood, and I would start adding a little bit more set dressing. Nowadays I set up also like all the cameras here. I didn't do that as much before, and I really like defined like each shot, so I kind of save time, because it's very easy to kind of just work on stuff that never is going to be seen. I did that mistake with my Harry Potter Great Hall. That project was a long project, like in time, because I built the whole basically as a game environment, but you don't see that. So would I give myself advice would be to probably simplify that scene, or show more that I built the whole environment, because now it's a couple of shots on my art station, and that was kind of completely builded, and every ornament was kind of hand sculpted and stuff like that. So it was a quite undertaking. Because we have to remember, like we try to build environments that we see in games that usually are done by a team of people, and we are just one person. So we need to kind of be smart about our processes. But then of course also really focusing on learning the fundamentals basically. Was there any kind of questions? I can jump back here. So
That's gonna be the next thing I was gonna mention. So
yeah.
awesome going through that. While they're asking questions, I'm also gonna post up, just so you guys know. If you guys submit your application before September 19th for the boot camp coming up, I'm gonna post up the link. You guys can get a 30% discount on joining the boot camp with Jake.
So let's see. I saw there was a UV question. UV map, we all love them. I would say, are you thinking of the building here, for example? Like these are like each has their own kind of UV set, right? So, and these are very kind of like point to, I would say, I can open the scene in Maya, we can look at it.
Sorry, I was muted, Jacob. I thought you guys could hear me. I just want to let you guys know I have the application if you guys would like to join bootcamp. It's gonna give you 30% off if you get it in before September 19th. So you guys have that right up in the comments if you want.
But yeah, here we can see a little bit like that, like setting up clean like this. And here I have a little bit of the first kind of like creating variations of the corner pieces here. So then we can kind of like intrude a little bit, and we get like what I like, kind of like having a little bit of a silhouette on the buildings basically. But yeah, the UV mapping, I would say when we work this clean, it's very kind of simple because it's gonna kind of just be in UV space basically. So you can see I'm kind of following grid space here also, very cleanly, which make UV mapping very and not that I would say frustrating, especially for these kit pieces, because it's like everything is just grid based both in world and in UV map basically. So you can see here. I hope that answered the question. There was maybe some earlier questions that never got answered. I would say if people didn't get them answered, they can maybe write them again. I can scroll a little bit and check. And of course, like you can always kind of like if there is kind of like anything that was unanswered, I'm on Discord. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or kind of art station, I would say.
We also have the Discord channel if you guys would like to tag any of us over there as well. We can clash with the environment course. So they're asking, would the bootcamp clash with the environment course?
Are you thinking like the gap environment course?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be probably careful doing both at the same time. Like if you really want to learn, I would probably not do both at the same time. I think that's can be quite stressful, I would say. I don't know day wise. Like, do you know the days for the game art?
I believe the boot camp is going to be Mondays and Wednesdays.
Yeah,
And the the actual gap, the environment class, that tends to fluctuate throughout the week. So depending on the instructor and their availability, it can be Monday, it could be Thursday. Really depends on the instructor.
yeah. I mean, you could probably combine the project, like do the same project in the same course, but then it's going to be a lot of meetings. So I would say I would maybe focus on one and then pick up the other one after, basically. Like if you want to use the time completely well, I would say. When
Just got
starting a
another.
new, yeah,
Oh, sorry.
it's very good. I really like this question.
Mhm.
So actually, I can bring up like I have a presentation I didn't do, so I can bring that up because I kind of covered that question. Let's see. So this is like a presentation I usually do during my gap, but I kind of update it a little bit. But I can maybe run through it a little bit because there is kind of some points that are a little bit more kind of interesting. I know there is like full screen right somewhere.
Right there. If you hit this, if you hit the slideshow.
Ah, it's this one. Okay, thank you.
No worries.
So I really like this view because this is what environment art feels sometimes. I feel like it's just endless of buzzwords that you need to learn. But what I try to is like pinpoint like what are the really important ones, and then we can just what I talked about before. Can I sprinkle in the other ones once in a while in each project, but not maybe adding all of them at the same time. So these are kind of the 10 fundamentals that I kind of live by, I would say. But I want to kind of jump to the question about like a project size. So let's see. scope. So it's very kind of common to like go to like concept art and see these like epic sceneries and like thinking like I want to tackle this. And I did that myself with like the Harry Potter scene. Like I like I'm gonna build like the whole Great Hall, and I had at that point never built an environment scene before, so I was not that smart. So I kind of just started super hyped and then went into kind of a wall of just too much to figure out basically. So you're basically never gonna even maybe attempt to climb the wall basically or the mountain in this picture. So I think it's always a very kind of like need to be kind of like honest with yourself, like where I'm standing and what is my portfolio right now. And I would say sometimes it can be better at maybe aiming for a mid-size if you are a little bit more kind of like knowledge based. Starting out, I would just kind of do like a small corner like and just figure out fidelity. And I would say like even for me, like sometimes I do like big scenes and sometimes I jump between big scenes and small scenes. So with big scenes I kind of work more on like composition and figuring kind of out to make cool scenery, and small scenes is more about like fidelity. And I would probably start with like small scene and figure out fidelity if you're starting out, like just figuring out every aspect of the creation. Kind of getting a workflow will make process so much fun. So I kind of like to keep this as an example. So we could have built this scene. It would be cool, quite big. But we could also like just kind of pinpoint this car and like zoom in on this car and just fill that scenery with like bunch of like storytelling and just push kind of the fidelity of it and make it much more interesting. And it's probably going to be a stronger concept or a stronger portfolio piece then. So it's very easy to lean towards the big and the epic, but usually you can kind of like get quite a good fund like quality benchmark when you build like more focus basically.
And they
Yeah.
also asked about basically the typical time frame that an individual scene like this would take in your portfolio for a portfolio piece.
So that I would say it always depends on the artist and like the time you can kind of put into it. Like I would probably plan for like because most of us kind of have don't work on it full time, so we have to like think about that. Um, so I would probably like depending on size, I would set it between 1 month to 3 months basically, depending on the size of the project basically. So what I like to do, especially a lot before, but I still do it a little bit, is do these planners. So I can show that. And I like color. Like I like to make. So this is kind of like a mid-production example of my King Arthur scene, where I was in a competition for it, so it had a deadline, and I just kind of like planned basically everything. And and of course like when you're starting out it's like you are gonna like miss planning and it's not gonna really like always kind of be what you plan for, but I think you're kind of like learn a little bit, okay, this took a little bit longer, so you're gonna be better at kind of reassessing that for the next scene. So it's never hurts to kind of like plan a little bit. And I'm basically just having kind of like a gate here. So the idea with these are basically that everything needs to be green, like everything needs to be proxy modeled before I can move over to high poly. So what I mean with proxy, it's like people call it white box sometimes. It's basically what we saw in our scene here. So for me, it's kind of like a more detailed, a more thought out blockout basically. So a blockout sometimes we can just bunch together and put into Unreal and see if it works. And a proxy is its own kind of mesh, I would say, and it has like good pivots. So it's just kind of like a cleaned up blockout basically. So kind of these assets I would call proxy because they kind of like are almost like there. Like for a stylized game, like a very simplified game, they could even maybe work if you just put on like a tileable texture on it. So for me, a proxy model is basically clean naming, clean pivot, um, and placed in the scene basically, because then I can just work on this. Like if I sculpt this and just save it over, it's just gonna be plop into place basically. So that's what I mean with proxy.
There was one other question, Jacob, about how do you decide what details are essential and include in a game ready environment versus just keeping it simple?
Great question. I would say it depends a little bit what like the style you're going for. Like some styles are more leaning on silhouette and working just with pure silhouette. If you go towards realism, then of course you have to maybe put more time into like detail basically. Something we think about a lot in games is usually where is player's eyes traveling. So we might not put like that much emphasis on things that are very high up in the ceiling or high up for a player that's never going to see it. So you can like think of that aspect, but for a portfolio scene could be that maybe some objects far in the distance of your scene, if you have a fixed camera, might not need that much attention as if you did a close-up. So if we jump to my Coletti bar, for example, and I would recommend probably not doing these many shots because it adds a lot of work. Like I tend to sometimes add a little bit too many shots, especially these close-up shots. They need so much time because, of course, like every asset needs to kind of like keep the consistency of a visual style. Uh, but I do it also a little bit to push myself, of course. So I usually tend to like I have two long distance shots, and then I have or establishing shots, and then I have kind of like mid close-up shots, and then I have read close-up shots. So I kind of split between those three basically. Um, and for me, the idea is a little bit also like to show kind of like that I can manage every aspect basically is the idea. But if I would start out now, I would maybe do one of each instead. Like if this was my first scene. But I mean, my first scenes were basically very kind of like simple. Like my Paris scene here, just to kind of like just learn how to kind of push fidelity. I just made this shot basically. I didn't like if you would jump into this environment, there's nothing to right or left or behind you. It's like nothingness because it's kind of just really figuring out how to do a snapshot in a video game basically. Same with this one. Here I kind of like put the camera on the other side, but I mean it's kind of like I didn't add any kind of other aspects, and these are kit pieces, so this window is kind of just the same window here basically, like here. And this one, I started to do that thinking of like one main shot and then kind of two close-up shots basically to show a little bit storytelling. Hope that answered the question.
I think it did. All right, and don't see any other questions as of yet. Nope, never mind. Oh,
Awesome.
never mind. It wasn't a question.
Close this one. And then, of course, like sometimes there is maybe questions you don't want to ask this kind of openly. Like I said, you can write to me if there is a question you want to kind of ask in DMs only. So feel free to reach out for that.
Awesome. This was a great kind of walk through what the boot camp is going to be. And thank you so much, Jacob, for taking the time going through everything. This was really, really great to see.
Yeah, thanks for everyone that jumped in and looked. Um, it's extra fun when you do it with like other people, I would say. Like I'm looking forward to see kind of like how we will kind of like build a little bit of a group dynamic and help each other to figure out each scene basically. And like I said, if there is any questions, even if you're not taking the bootcamp, like feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any question.
So I think if you're at a good point, Jacob, looks like everyone is good. We got a couple nice thank yous.
Yeah,
Awesome, guys.
so I have some links, Paul, like
For sure.
where could I put those?
There should be a chat if you want to put it there, or if you want to do check a quick little post-mortem over on what do you call it? Discord. You sure you could put it up there, and all the other students would love to have it as well. So if you wanna put it up in the comments, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm thinking linking all my collections, so I can just talk about these quickly, because I think like breakdowns are so valuable. And I think there is so much information of just breakdowns on ArtStation, and ArtStation is kind of my morning newspaper basically. So I do basically a collection of every kind of like topic I think is interesting for especially students. So we have like game modularity. I even have like one for like junior portfolios. So I think this one is kind of like nice to see. Maybe a bit scary, but it's very kind of eye-opening, kind of where kind of like an environment needs to be when creating stuff. That's something we can always talk about, like, but like every of these aspects are kind of like the important ones. I would say probably modularity is the big one, and then here we have a good example what we talk about, like proxy or white box. So here we have the Indiana Jones games where they kind of just built everything grayscale, a little bit like what we have here, but this is like a stylized approach without with the color instead. But it's a very powerful tool to just figure out like, is this gonna work for very cheap cost time wise? Because like these modeling we can do very quickly compared to like building like the high polys and baking it and trying it out and then it doesn't work. This is not being used in every studio, so it's a bit like up to the studio, I would say. But yeah, all of these collections I'm planning on linking, and then I'm gonna also link an invite to this Miro board. This is open to everyone. It's a bit not cleaned up, but I need to kind of clean up a little bit again. But the idea here is basically that you have a bit of a checklist. A little bit what I usually talk about is kind of like reassessed here. This is a living document, so if I find new aspects, I kind of add them here. But this is a more kind of like breakdown on each aspect of environment artwork. So the first one is like more kind of pure blockout phase, and here we have like the more kind of like words that you may be gonna hear quite often in environment artwork. Phase 3 is specialization. I see it as so vegetation, designer, etc. But yeah, Paul, I'm gonna probably kind of bunch together all these links and we can put it somewhere that everyone can find it.
Absolutely. I think the best place to do it would be on our Discord channel so that everyone can get it there. And also we'll send out a email with all the links if you'd like. So this way everyone can get it.
So it seems like not everyone has the Discord
Oh,
access.
okay. All right. So then you know what we'll do, since everybody that came in today, we have their email. We'll send it out in an email to
Yeah.
everybody that showed up today.
Sounds good.
All right. Let's think. Sorry.
Yeah, I also saw a question how to reach out to me. Both like either ArtStation or Discord works. So whatever works for you, basically. Sorry, Paul, you were.
Oh no, I was just about to wrap it up. Thank you so much again. Thank you everybody for showing up, and I hope you guys were able to gain a lot of knowledge, and I hope you're excited for the boot camp that's coming up. I did post up the link. We'll do one more time just in case anybody missed it. If you guys want to schedule a call with one of our managers, they'd love to hear from you, talk about pricing, talk about what the environment bootcamp is going to be. And I think this was a really great event. Thank you again, Jacob.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for showing up. Have a nice rest of the week.
You as well.
Bye bye, everyone. The recording, Paul. Can I just leave and it's gonna?
Yep. I
recorded?
already took care of it. The recording is there.
Awesome. Then I jump out. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day, guys.